So Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was directed by Wes Ball and it stars Owen Teague, Freya Allen, Peter McCann, Kevin Durand, and William H. Macy. And this movie, taking place several centuries after the death of Caesar and war for the Planet of the Apes, a young ape known as Noah, his tribe is attacked. He has to try to find a new home. He has to try to find people who may have survived it. And he comes across several characters, including an ape who teaches him about Caesar, a human character, and well as a leader of another colony of apes who is distorting the views of Caesar, and now he must take him down. So this was a movie that I was kind of intrigued by, but not looking forward to. Now let me explain. I was kind of intrigued because I do like the trilogy of Planet of the Apes movie, the one with Andy Serkis. He was phenomenal in those movies. I do think it's a great trilogy overall. I do think each movie is kind of like, it stands out on its own, and I do think a lot of the performances are really good. Visually speaking, the themes are very fascinating as well, and kind of ask a lot of questions and such. And I was definitely intrigued by what they were going to do with this movie. However, there are three things that kept me from really being excited for this movie. One, no Andy Serkis. Two, no Matt Reeves. And three, Wes Ball was directing it, who previously directed the Maze Runner movies. Not a big fan of those. So I was definitely nervous about it, and also the trailer kept popping up in front of every movie, no matter what, ever since November. So I still saw it because I was definitely intrigued by like what was going to happen with this franchise. And honestly, for the most part, I liked it. There are some things I don't like about it, but I'll get into those. Let's start off with the visuals in this movie. Now, the visuals in the Planet of the Apes trilogy were fantastic, and I do think they are also very incredible here. I do think they're very well realized. The apes are very emotional and such, where it's like the motion capture technology is very well done and such. The scope of this movie is a lot bigger than some of the other Planet of the Apes movies, I feel like. I feel like there's definitely more of an expansive world with this movie, where I feel like some of the other ones, they definitely... War for the Planet of the Apes was pretty expansive, but this one I feel like is probably the most expansive of all these, like, new Planet of the Apes movies and such. I do think they're very fascinating. As far as the actors go, I thought most of the actors did a fantastic job. Owen Teague was pretty good as Noah in this movie. I didn't recognize who he was. As like, who is that actor? Turns out he's Patrick Hockstetter from the It movies. I'm like, oh, that's you? Okay, that's interesting. Definitely get a lot more in this movie, even though you don't really see his face. I thought he was good. Freya Allen, I thought she was really good as the main human character. Like when you kind of like learn more about her character, and definitely kind of see like towards the end of the movie like what her character has been doing. I definitely feel like it's really well done, and it's kind of makes me more interested in her character. Peter McCann as this ape that kind of teaches Noah about like Caesar and such. I thought he was good as a nice foil to Noah in this movie. And also Kevin Durand is pretty intimidating as the villain at times. It's like, oh, that's the guy from Abigail from a few weeks ago, the guy who was the big dumb idiot. He's the villain in this movie. It's like, oh, okay, that's pretty interesting. It shows that he has range. I also do like the questions this movie does ask about like, about like how, words being corrupted and distorted and such, like how's that going to affect people later on. I do think that's very fascinating, because it's clear that this bad ape is kind of like, he's distorting the views of Caesar and such, and like now Noah knows it's like, oh, this is what Caesar actually stood for. It's like, it's definitely very interesting. But as you kind of see like throughout the movie, the gray line becomes more gray as the movie goes on and on. I do think that's very fascinating as well. The score of this movie is really well done as well. I thought it was very intense. I thought it was very bombastic. I thought it was really well done. And also, I actually really like the cliffhanger ending. I am very fascinated to see like what this Planet of the Apes trilogy does. If this is a new trilogy or if this is just a one-off. I definitely don't feel like it's a one-off. It's definitely trying to be like, more than just like a typical, just like a one-off. I feel like it's definitely going to lead to something more. Planet of the Apes trilogy, you kind of have to expect a cliffhanger at this point with the franchise. Like, there was one in the very original one. There was one, unfortunately, in the Tim Burton one, and there's one here. It's like, okay, at least there's something to kind of, like, leave us on. It's like some kind of, I don't want to say twist ending, but, like, at least it kind of leaves you on something. It's like, huh, interesting. Where's it going to go from here? But let's talk about some of the things I don't like in this movie. First off, even though Kevin Durand is really good as the villain, his stuff is mostly shown in the trailer. I felt very disappointed by that. Like, What a Wonderful Day. That was the big selling point in that trailer. This movie, I feel like that's kind of like the main thing. He has a few moments here and there, but most of the stuff you kind of see is already in the trailer. William H. Macy's also in this movie. He doesn't leave much of an impact. At least some of the other human characters, some of these other movies like, James Franco, Gary Oldman, Woody Harrelson, Jason Clarke, John Lithgow, they kind of all left their imprint on this, like, on this franchise, but William H. Macy, not really. You could have put any actor in this movie, and the character would have been just fine. I don't understand, like, why he was even in this movie, if I'm being honest. Also, I do feel like, if I'm being honest, this may be the weakest of this new franchise, if I'm being honest. Like, I do think the pacing's a bit off at times, even though It's about the same length as War for the Planet of the Apes. I feel like it's a bit longer than it actually feels. I feel like this movie's like longer than it actually is. The movie's 2.5 hours long. And I feel like it kind of drags at various points where it's like you could just speed this up a little bit and just kind of like, we kind of get the point of this. You don't need to explore these things further than you already are. Again, except for that, maybe the moral ambiguity and like some of the questions that they do ask, I do think that is where I don't mind it dragging it out a bit. But pretty much everything else is like, okay, you can shorten this up a bit. But overall, I do think this is a solid movie. Not the best in this new Planet of the Apes franchise, but I was pleasantly surprised, I guess. Mainly because I had a lot of fear going into it. Mainly because no Andy Serkis, no Matt Reeves, and instead you get Wes Ball. But I didn't mind it so much. So I did like the acting overall. I did think the visuals are still impressive. I do think the scope is very well done as well. The questions that this movie asks are very fascinating. The score is well done. The cliffhanger ending is very interesting as well. And even though I kind of feel like some stuff was shown in the trailer, a little bit too much was shown in the trailer, some actors are pretty wasted in this movie. And I do think that it just definitely feels weakest of the three. I think mainly because like the actors don't express as well as Andy Serkis did. Like Andy Serkis is a master of all this stuff, and these actors are fine, but they don't. Maybe like another movie they can do a little bit more. So now that they have experience, like whatever the next Planet of the Apes movie is, definitely would be curious to see like what they would do with that, and maybe they'll be a little bit more expressive. I'll give Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what's your favorite Planet of the Apes movie? Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.